um, because we're like at half that. But 100
So,
licensed people changes my business drastically.
wow. So you're at 50 right now and you just need to add another 50?
Yeah, but you know the game. You'll lose some.
Okay. What's your attrition rate?
It's very small. I don't know the percentage, but I figure we're going to lose. I'm counting for 6 to 10.
Over the course of a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I figure, if we go, I got to go get 60. So, and we licensed, our ratio in the office is 24%. So
From the time that you interview them, accept them for the position, and actually get them licensed?
right. So they fill out in our company what's called an independent business application, and then from the time they fill that out to getting licensed, it's 24%.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And you just can't change that number. It's people.
Yeah.
It's just people. You got to
Yeah.
upgrade the system, and so we just got to play that number, and that's our whole focus.
So what does that process look like to get licensed? What kind of license do they need?
So they, in our business, they need an insurance license, a state life insurance license, and then the Series 6. So from the time they fill out that application, theoretically, and we send them to class, so you have to do 40 hours in the state of Florida. So let's say it's 2 weekends. So from the time somebody walks into class on a Saturday morning, they'll pass the class the following weekend, and then they theoretically can sit for the exam that week. So it's 2 weeks if somebody can stay disciplined.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, we have pretty similar metrics in our business, but our attrition rate is much higher, and the process to get licensed is a little bit higher barrier to entry. They have a 63-hour course, which they can knock out over the course of, a week if they went to the in-person one. But the problem is the application process with DBPR is, takes 45 to 60 days.
Wow.
So most of our recruiting ends up being people that already hold a license or people that just, got licensed. And we usually farm for recruits out of those pools.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's super interesting. So what does your interview process look like? Do you guys do group interviews and then?
It's funny. We've vacillated back and forth on that. So our strength is one-on-one, and then getting them into a team environment. So we're actually retooling our whole system in that regard, where we would do group presentations in the evening. We're taking that out and turning Thursday evenings into a pure training. So we'll hold our training on Thursday evenings, and then everything's one-on-one, and then getting them to that, into training, being a part of a team and an environment. So we're going to use the environment to really anchor them, equip them, keep them, but we're enrolling them personally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I used to work in a business selling Cutco cutlery, and I used to run. So I used to run a few of their offices, and our process was we would, basically set 20 to 40 people for an interview, and everybody comes in at the same time, and usually we'd get about a 50% show rate. So, if we set 20 people, 10 would show up, we'd do a group interview, we would accept about half of those. And then, so we'd have 5 people set for training, which is a, 3-day seminar, where they get in the environment and, show them the team and basically do a full on sales training with regard to how to sell Cutco.
Right.
And, our conversion rate from from the interview to, so we would, let's say we had 100 people that were accepted for the position one week. We would do 2 or 3 interviews a day, but have 10 people in the interview in each one. And if we had like 100 people set for training, on average, about 50 of those would show up for training. And out of those, about 30 to 35 people would actually launch from training and get going that weekend. So I haven't like merged any of what we do now into that model, but I'm actually toying with that idea this year because we're going to go on like a big, recruiting spree.
Yeah.
And just get people. I think we're going to do kind of a similar thing to what you're doing, which is just like get them into a training, just be like, super valuable and like teach them some cool stuff, and then get them thinking like, oh man, well, that was really valuable. What would it look like to, partner up with these guys?
Right. Well, yeah. Our whole thing is I want the application before they come to training. I mean, because we're doing okay. We just got Dean. He's going through the licensing process. Let's equip him, teach him, because it's every week. So we'll recruit and get the paperwork started one-on-one and use the training to kind of anchor it,
Awesome.
You haven't even started recording yet.
Yeah, I just hit the button a little bit ago. So we could always, crop some stuff out. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in, man. I mean, we definitely don't, if you don't have the book in front of you and you don't want to go.
I have it on my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's just dive in. Like let's set the foundation.
Okay. Well, what are you thinking? I mean, so like the first couple of things I really go into, is just context. Who am I? Where am I from? What, my story, so I don't know what you want to cover in regards to that.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is, because I think like through this process of just like having just great conversation around the, the message, they'll get to know you, they'll get to know me. And so, I think we can just sort of like dive into the actual content and set the stage that way. And then like throw in our own anecdotes, just to allow people to get to know us better.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I'm curious, what's the title of the first chapter, like that's based on content?
So meaning outside of my story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, here we go. All right. So I think that the real content comes from, I put modern men and the desires of women. So it's not, first 3 chapters are really my story, what I went through, getting married, walking that whole thing to lead me up to, what have I learned throughout the process. Mm. And I wanted to really, just kind of state what's going on with men. Like, I know, I really truly believe this. I think people have gotten to a point where they're going, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but something's off, right? I don't think we're just not talking about it, or people can't put their finger on it, or they're pointing blame. And I think I've gone over this with you before. The numbers are that it's crazy. 50% of marriages are going to end in divorce. Mm. And so one of the things I said was, picture it, right? A man and a woman, they stand at an altar, a gazebo, a beach, they hold hands and they say, I will be with you till death do you part, death do us part. And yet 50% of that will not happen. Mm. So we stand there with all the intent, all the purpose, all the passion, and 50% of the time they're going to quit. So there's a problem on the front end, or there's a problem during. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that brings up that, a few things pop up for me. Like there's a question of how does integrity play a part in this? But I also like start to think like, integrity is really like aligning with the identity that integrity is just a core value of. And I think maybe even the bigger picture is that a lot of men have an identity issue.
Well, big time.
So, yeah, let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Like, what are the fundamental identity issues that?
Well, let me share something. It's in the book, but I don't know if you probably don't know this story. So here's what I say. There's a problem on the front end. I was a mess in my 20s, Dean, like just an absolute mess. Insecure. People get insecure. I'm an introvert by nature, but then really insecure, clueless, always looking for my identity and other things. That's why I was in a rock band. And, if you were to say, really, why did I want to get a record deal or why did I want to be a rock star? Man, because I wanted an identity and I wanted to get laid.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Especially in the late 80s, early 90s, that's what it was: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I didn't do the drugs, but I wanted to do a lot of sex.
Yeah.
The Christian man admitting this, but this is where I come from. And, you're just in that identity, and I was lost, and I had the token rock and roll girlfriend, tall, blonde, beautiful, a freak, all of that. And here's all of this has context. So, because again, this is why I say there's a problem typically on the front end of those two people standing there saying, till death do you part. Number one, you don't realize what you're really saying. And it's so cliche. Sometimes when people get married, like they're getting married because I see this in the South a lot, especially in the Christian community of, well, we haven't had sex and we want to have sex, and it's a sin to have sex before marriage, so let's just get married at 20. Well, you're going to have problems at 30.
Right.
Because you're just starting to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
So, that could be a controversial what I just said, but hey, it's our podcast, right?
That's right, man.
So I
uncensored.
Yeah. So I had that whole thing, and then when my fiance broke up with me, I lost all identity. So I literally at 25 years old, had lost best friend, fiance. I'm living in a small studio apartment. This thing was so small, and I'm alone with me, and I was so broken. And meanwhile, that's when Trish showed up, and Trish and I had been friends for 8 years before it ever turned. But in my brokenness, we had a romantic encounter, and this is what I talk about with integrity. I knew how screwed up I was, and I knew I was going to crush her if we were in a relationship together. So this girl's my best friend. I trust her, with everything. And she's 5'5", 5'6", Italian, and I just got off of, 5'9", blonde. So like they're polar opposites. So I'm thinking, I need the tall blonde Barbie. Here's, shorter Italian, not my type. That's my friend. I'm going to crush her. And at one point she looked at me and she goes, are you even, do you even want to be with me? And it was a man up moment. And I looked at her and I go, I can't do this. I'm going to crush you. Like I had to choose my brokenness and deal with that rather than hurt this person. And I knew that, you know what I mean? It's like realistically and authentically looking at it and saying, I'm not right. And if I'm not right, it's not just about me. I'm really going to destroy her. So by the time we got back together, which was here's the crazy thing, from that point to when I called her, it was probably 6 months. Right. And I, in 6 months, did all kinds of dating, all kinds of stuff. And I finally woke up one day and I'm like, all right, I'm done. Like, I was done. I was done with the bullshit, done with the runaround. And that's when I really knew that she was the person I had been looking for. And actually, I was dating some girl. Actually, I was just kind of screwing some girl, and regularly, and Trish was going to come with me to a wedding that this girl wanted to go to. And she had said something about Trish, and Trish and I had spoken because I ended it. And I cut this girl off like that because she insulted Trish. And that's when I was like, okay, why did that affect me the way it did?
Mm.
You know? And so little things like that. Anyway, so my point is that by the time I said to Trish, I want to spend my life with you, I had done the work to lead me to that point. And I think that's not happening.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's so many reveals in that story that pop up for me, which I can definitely relate to, you know, just being broken and, you know, trying to fill a void and doing that through sex and partying and, you know, like just trying to find what feels good because all I know is that I don't feel good.
Right.
And, you know, like we kind of talked about it in our last conversation, but like, I think that we as men are thinking too much with our heads and not enough with our heart. And, you know, there's like the way that I interpreted your story just then is that there was something inside you that got triggered to protect Trish at that first encounter where you were like, listen, my heart is showing up here, but I don't want to deal with it just yet because I've got all these other things to deal with. And all I know is that it doesn't feel good for me to do what I am just, you know, I don't trust myself with you.
Right.
And I've been there. I've had relationships like that. And, in fact, the way that I met Jen, many people don't know this, but, you know, the way that I met Jen, I was kind of in that place. I had just gotten out of like kind of a bad relationship and a little bit of a broken wing, you know, and when I met Jen, I mean, I just had such an attraction to her, not so much really a physical attraction, but definitely a spiritual connection and attraction. And I was just like, hey, I don't want a girlfriend right now. And mostly because like, you're just too perfect. You're an angel. And, you know, like, I don't know if I'm just prepared to handle you right now. Yeah. And that spurred a lot of growth within me. And that was kind of like my, you know, my man up moment where I'm just like, wow, am I really going to let go of something just because I don't really know what's, you know, I don't know who I am. And so like a few themes that I picked up is like, you know, like we're filling the void of, you know, something that, that we actually don't even really want to, you know, to explore because we're too afraid of knowing the truth. And like showing up in that vulnerability is not easy because it does require heart and a level of openness that, you know, just most men in today's society they're conditioned not to be tapped into the heart and to be tapped into feeling. So I can totally relate to that. And there's like, I want to spend some more time just talking about this because
let me
these are breakthroughs.
Let me interject. And obviously, if we're going to have this conversation, I got to authentically be me and what I've learned and what I hold on to. Okay.
For sure.
So, I guess my disclaimer is I'm not preaching. I'm not professing. I'm just sharing what I know from my reality to be true. Okay. One of the things that John Eldredge talks about in the book Wild at Heart is that, you know, the Bible says that Jesus came to save that which was lost. And everybody thinks that it's referring to mankind, but it's really referring to men's heart. And men's heart have been lost. And That is so true more today than ever before, that we have lost what we were created for, which is the greater battle for, like there is a plan and there is a purpose to this universe, to this world, right? I truly believe that. And it's, we've talked about this. There's an enemy there. If you have light, you have dark. If you have good, you have bad. And the more we push God aside, the more we see what if you look at the world, the way the world is today, as this technical, think about it. We're so technologically advanced, yet more miserable than ever. We keep pushing God aside, the morality, the authenticity, the humility. It's the whole point of this book that I wrote. And yet men are lost more than ever because we've lost our heart, and our heart is connected to the divine. We were created for a plan and a purpose. And if we keep running from that, like what saved me, Dean? What saved, we use the term, well, I was saved by Jesus Christ. Well, even that can get cliche, unfortunately, in the church. What saved me was there was a foundation of truth, real truth, that when you stop listening to the noise of the world and you connect back to the truth, it's speaking to your heart. And that was the decision I made, that this has to become the foundation to everything that I base my life on. And Trish was the embodiment of that. Who she was, what she brought to the table. I literally went from saying to my sister, I know being with Trish, that I would come home, there would be dinner, it would be a happy home, she would want to take care of me, and that's boring as shit and I can't handle it. That's how chaotic I was.
Mm.
And so I had to get this right so that I could look at this woman who did care about me, loved me, want to build a life with me, was committed to me, all the things that are right and good, right? Integrity, all those things, but I was chaos. I had to deal with that chaos before I could resonate with, and then together we then go and fix all the crap, because she had crap, I have crap. But, and since we're having a millennial Gen X kind of dialogue, what people don't realize is, okay, we're going to get married, right? And I don't know why I learned this early on, but I certainly did, that if you're going to get married, if you're going to be with a person and you're going to go through life together, and I got another thing to share with you after this. It just happened this morning. You're going to have to give up 50% of yourself to another person. So why would you ever bring 50% to begin with? That means you're giving nothing.
Right.
Think about that, right?
Yeah, that's
like
so
I just
true.
understood, man, I had to get my shit together because I'm about to take half of this person and offer it to somebody else. She doesn't deserve less. You know what I mean? Like, and that's
Absolutely.
the problem with a lot of relationships is everybody's broken. Nobody's dealing with it. And they think the other person's going to help or fix their brokenness. You can't, because that person's dealing with their own.
Mm.
And somebody said to me this morning, and I was like, because we were talking about, you're having a boy, right?
Yes.
So you're going to have your son, and I can tell you that so I'm going to give you some great advice. It never stops. Okay. So don't let anybody tell you, oh, well, when they get to this age, it's easier. It's always a different challenge, and it never stops, Dean. Okay. Mm. So it's a new life. And even me saying that will never convey it to you. All I'm sharing with you is I used to think, man, when they get to this age, it'll get a little easier. Well, it never does. And then by the time they're out, somebody's coming back in. It's your parents coming back in, and now you're the parent of your parents, or it's grandkid. It just never stops.
Right.
So somebody said to me today, he goes, that's why some people say to me that they never want to have kids, because they just want to live. They're the kid. They want to live their life. And that's, you know what I mean? And that's it. And I'm not saying this against anyone who makes that choice. But I really believe that when life is not about us, when it's about others, because you just said it, eventually you sucking the life out of, or everything out of the world. When you're doing it alone, you're going to die alone. Mm. There's no legacy. There's no nothing. There's nothing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. You can't take it with you. You can't take any of it with you. And I learned with my father dying, and he died pretty young. He was 63 and I was young dealing with it. But that's when I learned what legacy is. Legacy is not financial. Legacy is the true imprint that you put on a person's soul that they then go out and imprint the same thing on others.
Yeah.
That's real legacy, So I don't know how we got on that tangent, but
that was beautiful, dude. Beautiful. Yeah. And like going like legacy. We oftentimes think of everything in terms of money nowadays, just because it's so part of the conversation in our culture. But, when I think about one of the greatest legacies ever left, that was Jesus Christ, which was nothing to do with money.
Right. Yep.
And the real riches were riches within the relationships and the impact on the most intrinsic level that we can imagine. So,
right.
Yeah.
He was dealing with the soul, right? He was dealing with the essence of existence. We were talking, we started with divorce, and I'm really talking to your generation and what we can glean, because I see it, especially I'm curious, you probably see it in the real estate business. I for sure see it in the financial planning business is, divorce and people falling apart and why, and all this other stuff. And I think I'll give you this story, because I'm transparent. Tristan, I would say 2018 was the biggest personal growth year, but the hardest year on our marriage. And we had a moment where I think I might have talked about this last time. We didn't talk for 5 days, and normally if we didn't talk, it would be 2 hours. So if it's 5 days, there's a problem. And when we finally had our meeting, and I asked her, I said, before, do you love me? I didn't even ask her beforehand. I listened to her and what was bothering her. And we went through this, all these things, and all of it, number one, was neglect. It was not meeting each other's needs. And all of it could be fixed if each of us were willing to give up, this is my right. You know what I mean? And because we were able to do that, we'll be stronger from that moment. It's not all fixed, but I think it'll be the hardest moment led to some, the start of something really awesome as we go through this change in our life. But how many people are willing to do that? You know what I mean? Like being able to sit there and say, okay, hold on. What are the issues? What's the foundation? What do we need to work on? What are we committed to? And how do we work through this? Because I really believe if two people love each other, right? If you really love somebody, then the world will try to erode that. But if you go back to, no, I really genuinely love this person. And after 21 years of marriage, I can tell you, physical love goes like this. But what starts in the beginning that goes like this is the love and respect of that person. And that's where the real commitment comes from. You know what I mean?
Totally, man. That makes so much sense and resonates to a really deep level for me. And wow, yeah. I mean, and that's a great thing to trust in. And that is, I've gotten into relationships for so many of the wrong reasons.
Don't we all?
And it was all, just based on the stimulus that it would provide for me versus like the knowingness and the trustingness in that actual person that we can co-create and co-create a life, co-create a family, co-create just amazing relationships. And it's like I think ego it's just me talking about my experience. Like my ego is so clever. Like it is, I sometimes like I have to I've done a lot of work in this area trying to identify where where my ego is showing up. And as I continue to kind of, develop that awareness of my ego, I start to realize, like, man, I was showing up in ego when my ego is convincing me that it wasn't ego. And so it gets so convoluted. And I mean, that is I think a much deeper conversation than I think what most men just need to hear right now. I think, most men just need to hear, like, first of all, we are all where we are supposed to be right now in this moment. And our creator has given us a perfectly crafted curriculum up until this point to deal with anything moving forward. And trusting in that, but also just like allowing the nakedness, like just getting naked with our emotions and with our, who we are as a man and what's important. Like when we get down to the core of it, we have, men are meant to play a very strong role in the family. We're the spiritual leaders. We're the, the rocks. And sometimes like that identity just gets really clouded because of all the fears and the societal, stigmas and what we're taught from, from our society to not show parts of us or not connect on certain levels. And I think that's what makes men powerful. And,
it's just two things got brought to mind. One is, I think the number is in the church world, listen to this, that if a child goes to youth in the church realm, if a child goes to a youth program, I want to say the number might be 4%, some small number, that the family will then go to church and, get centered and all that.
Mm-hmm.
If the mother does it, if the wife or the mother does it, I want to say, Dean, it's 11% or some small, maybe 20%.
Mm.
But if the father makes that decision, I think the number's 96.
Wow.
So don't tell me men don't have an influence on family and what we're creating. I talk about it in the book, being a creator, creating the relationships, creating the marriage. We create it. We create it with our spouses and our wives. And if you're not married and you create it with your girlfriend, but what are you creating? There's intent, right? If it's always about, well, you're here to serve me, which is what most relationships are early on, right? You know what I mean? Early when we're young and immature, and it's always because we haven't figured out our own shit. So then we bring somebody else into, it's all about my shit. It's like, hey, help me with my shit because I don't want to deal with my shit. So, and that's and then we wonder why it all falls apart, because you're not creating together, you're codependent together.
Mm.
The other thing that I got as listening to you talk was, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and there's the scene where it's in Empire Strikes Back where, have you seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's Luke Skywalker, right? And he's like meeting the master, and Yoda goes, all his life, he never had it. He always looked away to the future. He was looking away. And I think that's one of the most defining moments that sum up men. Right there. All their lives, they're looking away to the future, to the past, to the horizon, never our minds on who we are, where we are, and what we're doing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's shoved in this great sci-fi movie, but there's some lines in there that are so important, and that one is because the movie right before it, he's this young 20-something-year-old or 19-year-old, however old he is, and the suns are setting, and he's looking out, and he's wondering who the hell he is and what's his life all about. And the whole point is that we spend all our lives doing that instead of paying attention to, like you said, the perfect plan for where we are right now. What we're supposed to work on is right in front of our face. And we're just so distracted. we're doing this, right? Picking up the phone. We're distracted on what somebody else is doing, what somebody else is saying. And we keep pushing aside the stuff that we need to work on so that we can then give to our spouse, to our kids, and on and on and on. That's what technology is robbing people from.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, what do you think about, technology is just making it easy for us to find placebos for the void?
Have you read Outwitting the Devil?
No, but you told me about it. I think I actually ordered it on Amazon. It should be coming, I think today.
That book is just, we're drifting. We're drifting. And as long as we drift, the enemy of our souls, the enemy, right, the negative forces of this universe, the things that keep us on purpose, passionate and on fire, and like for God and all that, if we can drift, then we're taken out. We're not on purpose. And it happens, and he's so crafty too, so again, if people are listening to this, what people believe, I do believe there is an enemy. I 100% believe that, you can't have good without bad. You can't have, you just can't. And I think that I don't think it's some guy running around with a pitchfork. I think it literally, right, there's negativity, and the universe, I think the world as a whole wants to tip towards that, right? We don't tip towards good as a whole. We tip towards sin, and sin is everything that takes us away from, love and the completeness that we are, right? And we live in that existence. And as long as little things can come along and get you to drift, then you're not back on purpose. And it's always catching ourselves and go, no, wait. And that's why I love the plan that you showed me, right? Because that helps you not drift, right? I use Darren Hardy's, live your best year ever, right? Because I need something that hey, remember the goals, remember this, and all of those things, the power of your posse, the band of brothers, the accountability, the whatever, is we've got to have those things that say, hey, Dean, what about your, how you doing with your integrity, and how about your goals? And, you said you were going to do this and you're going to take a vacation. Did you do that? Oh, no, I forgot. Well, those things that keep us, back to purpose, is how you continue to move forward.
Love it. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing is like a few things that I want to be intentional about for our next conversation is to kind of go back to where this all started, where these influences, and we could trace it back to, I'm sure, really far away, but we could also talk about the enhancement of the temptations in today's society. And some of the relevant struggles that men have in, just developing the awareness of the actual influences. Sometimes we're influenced and we have these belief systems that are influenced that by something that's outside of our awareness. We don't really even know where it comes from.
Right.
We don't even know that our belief systems are actually there. And, we're just like looking through the lens, and it's just part of we just don't have an awareness. We're on autopilot.
So true.
So, like, that would be a really interesting conversation to have for our next one, is to, just kind of talk about what are the actual influences and what are the, the struggles and the challenges that come from that. And we probably need even another episode to talk about like what can we do about it. That's probably going to be the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
for sure.
But yeah, no, it raises some really good questions, man. And I appreciate you for showing up and being, vulnerable. And I, I'm called to match that. And so thank you for pushing me to be vulnerable. And these are just going to be some great conversations. So
yeah, they really are. I'm excited to talk to you because, you're just standing on the cusp, right? You're on that edge of greatness, dude. You really are. You're just putting it all together. And what an awesome moment It's kind of like, these are the things that get me emotional, because I remember being clueless, and mentors are so important. And all mentoring is, hey, I'm a little farther down the road. Let me just share with you some things that I've learned. Right. But gosh, what you can go do, dude, you're just starting out, and to have these conversations and how that can equip you. And then, I mean, it's greatness. It's greatness.
Awesome, man. Well, it's a pleasure, John, to have these conversations with you. And I'm just, like I said from the beginning, I'm just really looking forward to receiving from you and, co-creating these conversations and eventually letting the cat out of the bag. And hey, whatever people, I mean, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's just about like this, more of this conversation, and kind of tapping into that greater awareness for the problems that we actually, that we have, that we don't even realize that we have.
I tell you, I'd want you to write this down on something we can discuss in a later episode. Is it would be really helpful for me, and I'm sure my generation, Gen X and older, to understand what the millennial is actually thinking about the world they live in.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll give you a great example, Dean. It's a small one, but I remember calling someone. She was a millennial. She was in my business. She goes, "Yeah, I don't answer the phone. If you need me, text me." And I remember, like, no. We call people, right? But I think she said, it's got to be really, really important for somebody to call me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a paradigm shift. And I use that as an example because how much of that kind of, different perspective, paradigm thinking that our generation just doesn't even comprehend or relate to, where to you guys, no, that's normal. And which creates this, right? That it creates strife because people don't understand each other. And I think the difference between your generation and our generation and older is the difference between growing up in two completely different cultures. I think the mind shift is that much different in the world today that it would be really helpful to understand what a millennial's perspective on the world is, being in such a world of flux, right? In such change. It would be awesome to dive into that.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah,
no, totally. And I mean, I think the question here is identifying that there is a declining, there's just a declining, I'm trying to articulate this properly, but there's, like not wanting to have a conversation, face to face or over the phone and just on text. That's also like we're in a generation that we live behind our technology.
Yeah.
So, and we have identities that live in technology that are really the identities that we want to have, but are oftentimes just like sometimes we're overcompensating with the identities that we create on social media and whatever because of the identity in which we hold in ourselves is just so much, it's painful. And we're overcompensating. So like, when people that don't want to text, people that don't want to, there's a decline overall in the amount of people that want to text in this generation, which is also directly proportionate to the increase in depression. It's a closed off, it's a closed off, it's just a symptom of being more closed off or less open. And this all goes back to what this message really is all about, which is how do we be more open? Like, how do we find peace and power and influence in our openness?
Right.
And we don't have to close in. We don't have to isolate. We don't have to hide. we can be open, and the more open we are, the more powerful we are, but we don't really know what that looks like.
Right.
And that's a great conversation to have.
Yeah, I love it. Well, cool, man.
Awesome, dude. Well, great to chat with you, man. And I'm going to mark this off on week 1 of or week 2 of our podcast. So I'm knocking out the 2019 goals.
I love it. Listen, I am going to be out of town next Thursday.